Charles Oliveira, what do you do now? It's very interesting considering Oliveira, who was the champion and did not lose, is no longer the champion. Like, that's almost a riddle. If it wasn't us, if it wasn't people that understood what that meant, they'd think you were asking them a trick question. They'd think that you misspoke. Yeah, Charles Oliveira was the champion on Saturday, and he had a fight. He's not the champion anymore. Oh my goodness, he lost. That sounds like an upset. I've heard of Charles Oliveira. No, he actually won. Like, they think that you said something that you didn't mean to say. But what do you do now? Supposedly, I can't confirm it, supposedly there's an organizational rule that in this exact situation, meaning the champion misses weight, the contest goes on, and the champion wins. There is supposedly a rule that says, a policy, that that person, in this case who's Charles Oliveira, will automatically be one half of the title fight of the vacated title that he vacated even though he didn't lose. You guys understand what I'm trying to say here? That Charles Oliveira's next fight will be for the championship, or better said, the next time that they contest the championship, Charles Oliveira will be part of it. Okay, great. Against who? None of us disagree with that. Aside from the rule, none of us disagree with that. We fully understand that. Against who? And it does open a discussion up, I think. I think it opens the conversation of Conor McGregor, just by example. I think it opens the conversation of redoing Michael Chandler, just by example. But recent history says that Justin Gaethje also should be considered for that match. And by recent history, I'm just talking about Figueiredo versus Benavidez. Exact same scenario. I would suppose that the decision makers looked at it and go, look, if we're going to give Figueiredo the reward of being one part of the championship match, we can't reward the offender if we don't also reward the victim. So they moved Benavidez up. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the way that you have to do it. I've heard a lot of people say that. Well, there's a precedent set. I don't know about that. There is an event that happened. Does that set precedents? Or do you learn from that to say the scale and the violation thereof did not perfect or affect the performance, apparently, at least in that situation? Do you bring Gaethje along? That's what I'm asking you guys, because I don't despise that idea, I must tell you. From an X's and O's standpoint, like, if any part of your lion eyes tell you that Justin Gaethje just got his ass kicked, or Justin Gaethje got dominated, or Justin Gaethje got overwhelmed, if any part of your lion eyes tell you that, you need to go watch the match. Go rewatch the match. That hand that Oliveira landed that put Justin down, it was the most impressive part of the night. Because when's the last time you see anybody, no matter how hard they hit Justin Gaethje, sit him down? When's the last time you've seen Oliveira, regardless of the opponent, put somebody down in the very first round? You might be able to answer that question. You might be able to answer both of them. But I'm right when I suggest, when's the last time you saw it? It's not what anybody predicted. And things unravel very quickly, right? When something goes from bad, it goes to worse in a hurry, particularly inside of the octagon. So that entire sequence was predicated on something that most of us did not predict would happen, which is within the first round, Oliveira is going to hit Gaethje and put him down. It's very interesting. I mean, let's rewind the tape here. If you go start the fight again, Charles gets Justin's back. You probably are going to bet that Charles is going to win. Charles gets a rear naked choke. Is he going to finish it? You're probably going to say yes. But if we redo that fight and we say the punch never happened and never put themselves in that position, what would have happened that night? Do we at a minimum see a second round? Do we at a minimum see a fifth round? I mean, it turns into a very different contest. Everything does. I'm only suggesting, I don't despise the idea of Justin Gaethje going right into that. Justin Gaethje is going to have to call for it. He's going to have to talk about publicly what I just said. Of, hey, look, forget about the choke and forget about me getting out scrambled. Dude hit me with a hard shot. I'm trying to collect myself. Next thing I know, champion of the world's on my back. He's going to have to help us with that argument, but it is one of those things. If we know that Oliveira is going to go fight for the belt, I mean, look, this is such a distant memory. This went from a community being upset with Oliveira. How could you do it? And how could you disrespect the fort? And how could you not break a rule? It went from that to, my God, give him his belt back. Just give it back to him. Dana White talked about the way, hey, we're going to pay him and we're going to take care of him. And yes, he's going to go fight for the belt. And this guy's awesome and everybody thinks he's champion. Like, I mean, he got his acclaim. It was one of those remarkable performances that I have to question was even his best. As great as he looked, I do have to question that. How could have he been at his best? How could a guy that was just stripped of a championship, how could a guy that was loved and now everybody's booing him, upset with him, like how with just that mental approach could you go out there and be your sharpest and your best? So I'm going to submit for you that he wasn't. And he still did that? I mean, right, there's performances where when it's done, regardless of the outcome, you still got to sit back and go, just how good is that guy? Like, just how good is Charles Oliveira that on an off night in enemy territory, Justin Gaethje's home state, and he goes out and does something like that? It's really remarkable. Who are you going to bring in with him? I mean, 55 is really being looked at right now. I will tell you, as it pertains to 155 pounds, Dan Hooker has never been more sought after. Right? I know that Dan Hooker is on the short list of names for Conor McGregor's return. I also personally believe, and this can change very quickly, I personally believe he's leading in the candidates for Conor McGregor's return. All right, great, big fight. I don't know if I could submit for you a match that would be more fun to watch and more compelling in terms of predicting prior to the fight who's going to win and why than Dan Hooker versus Tony Ferguson. Now, I woke up this morning to a message. Very, very good source that told me Nate Diaz versus Michael Chandler is done. I'm going to leave my source's name out. He wouldn't mind if I came and told you guys, but I'm going to leave it out because I don't think he's right. I do not think that that's right, but if you are to look at what Michael Chandler said on Saturday, if you want to break that down like poetry, and you want to really try to figure out the meaning aside from the words, which in poetry, it does have meaning aside from the words, when Chandler talked about Conor McGregor, that could be interpreted in a couple of ways. First off, he wants Conor. Okay, great. We've got it. He said that before. And second, he's hedging his bet. So that if Conor and or company came back and said, well, we do it, Conor's next fight is going to be at 170. He's already gotten ahead of it, said I'll go there too. But if you want to interpret what he said, it sounds as though Michael Chandler is saying for you, for a big fight, I will leave this weight class and I'll go to that one. Which is where you could see a little bit of room to the Nate Diaz thing. I'm not ready to predict that for you. My source is very strong. I believe that my source does believe it's true, and I believe that he was told it in a way that he thought he was getting inside information. I don't know that I buy it. I don't know that Chandler's going to leave and go up to 170, and that creates a whole plethora of issues. As soon as you leave your division, even if you think selfishly for you, well, it's great, and it's for the better good, and it's for one night only, it messes with everything. What's the point? What are you going to do when you get there? What happens if that opponent that you agreed to fight pulls out and the show must go on and they insert somebody else and then you try to come back and go, well, I'm not going to fight him. I'm not even in that weight class. Well, you were a second ago. What are you, a bully? You only go places you think you can win, right? It's one of those things that gets really sensitive really fast. So you guys are probably going to hear this rumor before you hear from me. This is going to catch on to the interwebs that it's going to be Nate Diaz versus Michael Chandler. I'm here to tell you, I'm light on the idea. I'm confident that Nate is going to fight at 170. He and Chandler's fun and all of that stuff. But I think Nate's going to fight another 70-pounder. And I think that 70-pounder, for better or worse, is going to take the leap against Diaz to hope that if he's still here remaining, win or lose, that he at least affects his career, at least affects something within the rankings. And I also think it's very important, personal, just Chael's talk here, that Chandler does stay with it 155. There is a number of scenarios, all the way down to right this moment, that Michael Chandler could step in there with Oliveira in a rematch right this moment. I would not bet on that. I would not predict that for you. But they do pay musical chairs down there with that championship. And weird things happen really fast, right? I mean, the guy that was the champion a week ago is no longer the champion. Like, weird things happen within this sport. A title that was set to be defended, the match went on, but the title was vacated and nobody got the strap in. Like, weird things happen within this sport. I think Chandler's a very meaningful character. I think he's a very meaningful personality. His skills speak for themselves. I think he's championship quality. I think Michael Chandler is likely to see a championship match again, even if it's not immediate. And if he leaves the division, it creates a little bit of a problem of how do we do that? So a lot of moving parts at 155. A lot of interesting things at 155. I will never cease to be let down, and I'll never cease to be disappointed, though I should cease from being surprised. An opportunity for two people to fight for a championship has now presented itself. We're told somewhere that Oliveira gets one of those spots. Nobody is yet to prove that, by the way. We know for sure at least one other guy gets to be pulled into that. And I have not heard a single 55-pounder, and I do mean not one, say it should be them.